Super excited about this topic today. I'm very grateful we're able to have Kaitlin on. Kaitlin and I have been trying to make this work for like a little over a year now. We just couldn't get the timing right. And we had so many interview spots that filled up super quickly last time around. But this time I reached out to Kaitlin and I was like, we need to make this happen. So she's one of our first interviews this season. I'm super happy about that. But Caitlin's going to be talking about how to provide neurodiversity informed therapy for AAC and GLP learners. And I know this is a topic that a lot of people request frequently and want to learn more about. So thank you for coming on today, Caitlin.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to talking.
So this is approved for point one ASHA CEUs or one PDHs. And these are our learning outcomes. So by the end of this pod course, we hope that you'll be able to describe how to use AAC with Gestalt Language Processors, how to identify at least two strategies for incorporating neurodiversity informed approaches into your therapeutic practices, list 3 tips for new AAC therapists. Well, you'll be listing 3 tips for new AAC therapists and describe at least 2 recommendations for parents of new AAC users. And here's our agenda. So we're going to start off with some introductions and backgrounds. Then we'll give a brief overview of Gestalt language processing and how AAC fits in with that. And then we'll talk about what neurodiversity informed approaches are and how to implement them. Then you'll talk about your tips for new AAC SLPs and recommendations for parents of new AAC users. And then we'll finish up with some references and closing remarks. Caitlin, do you want to go ahead and come on and introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Kaitlin. I am a pediatric SLP. I'm the owner of Competent Communicators LLC. It's a small clinic in East Providence, Rhode Island. I see outpatient clients there, predominantly autistic children, but also some early intervention clients. And then I also do some contract work with a couple of local school districts for AAC evaluations and training. I am an ASHA member. I am trained in the natural language acquisition framework for Gestalt language processors. I took the meaningful speech course a few years ago, and that sort of kick-started like transforming my therapy. I have also taken Jesse Ginsberg's course, ASD from the Inside Out. I think it's been reframed to more of a sensory certificate course, but very similar, learning how to use sensory strategies in therapy for young children. And then I have a lot of experience doing AAC evaluations. It was sort of something I jumped into as a CF in 2015 and kind of grew and just taught myself and learned from others from there.
Amazing. We have very similar paths, I feel like. I think we graduated around the same time and kind of dove into the AAC. So that's really cool. I'm glad like we're able to finally connect. My name is Finita Litvak. I go by she, her, also have a passion for AAC. I've had the opportunity to present at local and national conferences and co-authored the Lou Knows What to Do book series. I also took the Meaningful Speech course and became an NLA trained clinician in early 2023. And when I am not podcasting or doing speechy things, I have recently taken up tennis lessons and creating cricket designs for family and friends. So, like getting creative at home and making specialty lattes instead of spending money at the coffee shop every day.
I need to get better about that. I saw that when I was reading the notes. I was like, ooh.
We got the Breville espresso machine. I think that's
Hmm.
what it's called. I'm sure it has like a fancier name, but I really love it. And it is expensive, but we were doing the math. If you go and get like a good
Oh,
coffee,
yeah.
not a Starbucks coffee, like you're going to make that back in 2 months or less.
Hmm. Yeah, like a coffee up here is like $10 with a tip.
Totally. Same thing. Yeah. But it's like so much better, right? Like it tastes so much better.
Hmm. Yep.
We could probably spend a whole episode talking about coffee and how to get the right blend and all of that, but we'll save everybody here. Caitlin, can you go ahead and share your financial disclosures?
Sure. So I am an affiliate for Meaningful Speech and Speechie, also AAC Ally, which is an AAC course run by Rachel Madel, who's an AAC specialist. So I just have a link where I can make commissions from sales for those products and courses. And then, like I had mentioned, I'm a member of ASHA.
Awesome. And then I have ownership interest in Speechie Side Up LLC and Tassel Learning LLC. I'm also an affiliate for Simple Practice and Meaningful Speech and a member of ASHA. All right, so let's dive right in. Do you want to give a brief overview of Gestalt language processing? And then we could kind of talk about how AAC can be beneficial?
Sure. So Gestalt language processing is just like analytic language processing, just a different way to develop language. It is very common with the autistic population, but just because you're a Gestalt language processor does not necessarily mean that you are autistic. So Gestalt language processors, instead of seeing single words as a unit of meaning and building up. So analytic language processors, they would start with a single word, they would combine to a two-word utterance, a three-word phrase, four-word sentence, and so on, and then building grammar that way. Gestalt language processors, they are really drawn to intonationally defined chunks. So these could be songs, these could be parts of, clips they've heard, different media. It could be something that they've heard someone say. And so they are drawn to this intonational pattern. And so this chunk of language is how they develop units of meaning. So then there's different stages that they go through from there. Stage one would be delayed echolalia. So using the utterance exactly as they heard it, whether it be from someone else saying it or a song or a TV show. Stage two is where they start to mitigate some of their gestalts. So they start mixing and matching different gestalts, taking longer gestalts and making them shorter, using parts of gestalts. And then stage three is where they sort of get into the analytic way of developing language. So once a Gestalt language processor is always a Gestalt language processor, but stage three is where they start to develop like referential meaning from single words. So they're going to start using single words to reference things. They're going to start putting together two-word combinations, and then from there they build in early grammar and then more advanced grammar as the stages go on.
That was a really nice overview in such a short amount of time. So thank you for that.
I know, it's like hard to, it's like scraping the surface.
Yeah, but I think it's a good like starting point and I hope that anybody that's listening to this is already kind of getting familiarized with Gestalt language processing, especially if you work with the autistic population. So if that is completely new to you, then I would definitely say to start seeking more information. And I know you give some references at the end for people who are wanting to learn more, right?
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. Okay, so how does AAC come into play with our Gestalt language processors?
So I think AAC can be really beneficial for Gestalt language processors, really those that are in various stages. So I've used it with clients who are in stage one, whose speech is like unintelligible, or they may be just, using scripts, long scripts from media and songs to kind of give them a visual representation of different language and a different way to model some different scripts and gestalts for them. I've used it with clients who are using vocal speech in stage one and two, and it's been really great to kind of see them move through stage three and four with the AAC device. I find it really helps them see how they can break down chunks of language they've been using into a single word level by having the visual from the AAC device to kind of aid with their early grammar. So for GLPs, when we're considering AAC, it's sort of this process where we're not changing an AAC device, we're more adding on to it. So we want to make sure that we're still using, a research-based, robust vocabulary. There's so many out there now. Touch Chat with Word Power, Lamp Words for Life, Proloquo to Go, TD Snap, Proloquo. There's, various, you want to still do feature matching and do an AAC evaluation and all of that. But then from there, for clients in early stages, you might add on like a Gestalts page where you're going to have various stage one Gestalts. And we want to make sure that this is really customized for that client. So we want to be thinking about what Gestalt is this specific client using and what are they trying to communicate with those Gestalts and customizing in that way. So we may have some traditional Gestalts that we might, expose different children to or certain phrases that we consistently add to AAC devices, but it's also really important to think about that specific child and their interests and what they want to be communicating about. And those are the phrases that we might add to the AAC device that could become possible gestalts. And just because a phrase is a phrase doesn't necessarily mean it's a gestalt. Each child is going to decide for themselves, what modeled phrases really resonate with them. And then knowing what we know about GLPs and their interests and how they're drawn to intonation and rich intonation and the dramatic effect of things, we want to think about adding, different media clips to the AAC device, adding different clips of songs that they're really interested in, exploring different voices and pitch, and really looking at those settings and seeing what each individual child is really drawn to.
Yeah, I feel like those are all really good points. And I'm sure anybody that's watching this or listening to it is probably wondering, okay, so where do I add on in the devices? Do you have any tips for that?
So I think you want to consider each individual device and how it's programmed. So, and also each individual client. So, I guess I have some clients that can pick up on a multi-word, multi-icon model really quickly and retain that as a whole phrase. So, for example, I have one client who uses touch chat. He doesn't actually have a Gestalts folder. He more just uses Gestalts by combining icons. He uses spoken speech and an AAC device. But typically you want to put, the Gestalts in the folder that they are related to. I find that that works for most children. So say a child has a Gestalt like related to being hungry, you might put that under the foods folder on touch chat. So like you can navigate there and model for them their Gestalt, say it's I'm so hungry, and then you're kind of modeling that Gestalt and then talking about what they may want to eat. If they have a Gestalt related to not feeling well, you might put that under the describe page where it talks about different emotions. So for a lot of clients, I've found having the Gestalt in a place that is related to the activity makes the most sense for them. I do have some clients that really like having just a Gestalts page. And so I may add in touch chat under like there's an extra page 1 and 2. Lamp Words for Life has, I think I've been doing under mine, like my phrases, where I just add all different Gestalts on that one page. And I have some clients who really like that. They really like to play around with their Gestalts. They like to hear the feedback when they select one. And so having them all in one place is something that they enjoy. It is a bit of trial and error, I would say, for each client. Some really like them set up in one way, others may prefer an alternative way. I do recommend having like mitigations and full Gestalt sort of related in similar places. So I have one client, he has like a stage one Gestalts folder, and then he has his mitigations folder that he goes to now that we're working on mitigating. And I have the mitigation located in the same space, just on a different page as the original Gestalt, which helps him with motor planning.
How does your session look when the client is using spoken language to mitigate? Let's talk about like stage two. Are you modeling on the AAC system, like in addition? How are you juggling both?
Yeah, that's a good question. I find a lot of my clients to be really dynamic and they may not present the same way week to week. So I kind of follow their lead. If they seem more drawn to their AAC device that week, I might put more of a preference on or more of a focus on that. If they are more vocal and able to use more language that day, we might focus more on that. We always have the AAC device there, but I typically will model on both, but I don't really see one as being superior to the other. So if I have a client come in one day and they seem pretty dysregulated and they're not able to access spoken speech, that's fine. We just kind of go in more with the AAC device and do more modeling in that way. But I feel like my sessions are really fluid. They're always kind of changing. It's not one structured or set way, to be honest. So it really just depends on each child that day.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you said that because that's how my sessions are too with my Gestalt language processors. And so I was just like wondering, especially like now that we're getting into like stages 4 and 5 and like not using the AAC system as much because like this client prefers spoken language and, is pretty regulated during most of our sessions. I'm like, am I doing a disservice by like not modeling on the AAC system? But it is tricky. There was like a day maybe like 3 weeks ago where the client like was dysregulated after like a traumatic event at the playground at
Mhm.
school. And that's when I was like, okay, we definitely need to bring the AAC system like out and modeling on it again because we hadn't had to use it like in a while. But in like coming from like an AAC background, I'm like, oh my gosh, like what am I doing? But the
Mhm.
client's just like doing so well. So I feel like it's kind of hard to like juggle that, but I think it's a case by case basis too.
Yeah, and I think something that I think about a lot now that I really try to focus on neurodiversity-informed therapy is, like, in AAC courses in grad school and even when I was just starting out, it was very much like the child has to have their AAC device on
Mhm.
them 24/7. It has to be with them all the time, but, like, I work with an 8-year-old and, like, he doesn't really bring it anymore, and he's in stage 5, and I asked him, like, "Hey, why don't you have your device today?" And he's like, "I don't need that anymore. I don't wanna use it today. Like, it's at home. I know where it is if I need it." And I'm like, "Okay." Like, I'm not gonna be like, "You have to bring that
Right.
with you." Like, we are working with these kids to kind of help them develop, like, their a life that they
Right.
want and what they want it to look like, and, like, he has the autonomy to, like, be like, "Hey, Caitlin, I don't feel like I need that anymore." And I'm like, "Okay, that's great. Like, you know where it is if you wanna use it." And that was, like, a big learning curve for me, I think, because it was so ingrained in me, like, they must have it with them all the time, but if I have a client who's able to tell me, like, "Hey, I don't feel like using that today. This is how I wanna communicate." I mean, I can't really be like, "No."
Such a good point because the same thing was ingrained in me too. And that's like where I think I struggle sometimes. But I think anybody who's listening to this just know it's not like black and white. We really have to listen to the client. And yes, of course, you want to give the client as much exposure to their AAC system as possible. But also, we need to respect their wishes and what they want to do. And you might be thinking, like, oh, well, if I don't model, then they're not going to know how to use it when the time comes. But I feel like you're gonna know. You're gonna know your client. You're gonna know the skills that they have and how they're gonna be able to communicate modally. Is that the word? To have like that total communication, you know? I don't know if that makes sense. I
Yeah,
really was just
definitely.
piggybacking on what you said. So that's amazing. And I feel like some really great tips for how to use AAC with Gestalt language processors. Now let's talk about neurodiversity informed approaches. So it looks like you're kind of differentiating neurodiversity affirming and neurodiversity informed. So I'm curious to hear the differences.
Well, I think for me, a lot of what I try to think about is just not trying to get a specific child to fit a specific mold. So just the understanding, the overall understanding that all brains are created equal and all brains are important, and we're not trying to get an autistic child to look not autistic or to communicate in a way that a neurotypical child might, and just kind of meeting each child where they're at. I think has been really transformative for my practice. And one thing I will say is I think that neurodiversity affirming, when I think about it, and this could be just, I might be off base, but I feel like it's something that is thought about a lot with autistic children. And though that is the predominant population I work with, I also have some clients I work with that aren't autistic or may not be diagnosed yet. And I think I try to just think about whether or not there's like a medical diagnosis here. There is like the possibility based on what I'm seeing of this child having a neurodivergent brain. And so understanding that and respecting that and meeting that child where they're at. So a lot of what I do is, sensory based therapy with my younger clients, not pushing for spoken speech, which I think is a big change for some parents I've worked with, for example. I've had parents express like, "Oh, you're not sitting at a table and you're not making them imitate like certain flashcards." And, there's nothing wrong with sitting at a table. Sometimes we do if we're playing something like Play-Doh, but this is just something I had a parent say to me once, like, "Oh, we're used to very traditional tabletop therapy." And then I was explaining, like, your child's body is showing me that they need to move around. So we're moving into the gym and kind of incorporating that and explaining that I'm not getting their full attention and focus if they're putting so much pressure on their body to stay still at this table right now, and kind of showing them that sessions can be a bit more dynamic than maybe they were previously used to.
I like how you worded all of that. I think these gives some really good talking points for SLPs who are listening to this. And I agree that, it's not always just like working with our autistic clients, but there are other kiddos who fit, the neurodiverse. I have to remember to get the terms right, population as well, or
I know, me too.
neurodivergent. Yeah. So awesome. Let's go ahead. Is there anything else you wanted to say about this before we move on?
I don't think so. I mean, I think just a big piece of it is just honoring, family goals and then patient goals as well. And no two families are going to look the same, right? And just like you're meeting the child where they're at, like meeting the parents where they're at. So if you're bringing up AAC, for example, and like the family's not ready to hear it yet, thinking about, okay, like what can I use as, say, visual supports to help this child communicate or show that, there are multimodal ways of communication, that down the line, as you continuously build more rapport with this family, you might be able to bring, the conversation back up and bring it up in a different way and a positive way of showing like, hey, I saw your child, doing this with these supports and that's really great. And, do you think we could maybe revisit this conversation a bit, and trying to approach things from a more positive perspective than a deficit-based perspective can be really helpful.
Yeah, great points. I love that. So what are your tips for new SLPs? Well, not I guess newer SLPs, but like if they're not a new SLP like coming out of their CF, but they're new to AAC. What are your tips?
Yeah, it can be really overwhelming, but I think just for first and foremost, like I've had people ask me like, "Oh, what are your credentials to do AAC evals?" And you could
Mhm.
just start. Like as a speech therapist, you just like start. And so, just decide like I'm going to give my clients the most tools in their toolbox to be able to communicate. And so, like, what can I do to get more comfortable with AAC? So, one thing would be to find a mentor. I know different speech therapists and AAC specialists offer like online coaching or consultative calls, or I've had people message me before just like a few questions, and if it's like something quick and easy, I'm like happy to respond. I'm not going to be like, "Oh yeah, you have to book a call." And
Yeah.
if you want to talk long term and like meet more consistently, something like that, okay, but knowing that there are people out there that want to help and there are people that are passionate about not gatekeeping AAC, and we want other clinicians to be more familiar to be able to help more clients. Another thing that's really helpful is reaching out to local reps. So, like, PRC Saltillo has a representative in your area. Toby Dynavox has a representative in your area. Talk to Me Technologies has representatives in your area. So reaching out to them, building a relationship with them so that you know who to go to, you know which company works with which insurances, wait times for various devices and things like that. There's also ways to get applications for free as a speech therapist. So I know like TouchChat has a partner program. LAMP, you have to do an online course and then you can get the app for free. There's a way to get TD Snap through Toby Dynavox with an ASHA number. So there's definitely different ways that you can get different vocabularies and just play around with them. When I was starting out, I used to like go home on the weekend and use one vocabulary at home each weekend. So like I would still talk to my husband and stuff, but like I would, play around with it and we would kind of make a game of it. And I mean, everybody's learning together. So it's not something where like it's going to feel like, you may not be super comfortable or somebody else knows so much more, but like we all started the same way. And so just knowing like even getting a device in front of your child or your client and learning it with them, that's one step ahead of just not having a device at all. And then there's a lot of local, well, not local, speech, like AAC groups online. So there's a big community of AAC SLPs on Instagram. There's a Facebook group, AAC for the SLP, where people are more than happy to answer questions. I had like questions about alternative access recently, which isn't something I'm super familiar with, even though I've done AAC for a while, and I got a lot of feedback, which was really helpful. And then just presuming competence, like any client that you think AAC could potentially help communicate, like give it a chance. We don't want to be the ones gatekeeping AAC devices from kids when we're supposed to be the ones helping them to be able to communicate to their best potential.
Mm-hmm. 100%. I feel like these are all really great starting points for SLPs who are newer to AAC. Part of it probably is like, what is even available, right? What does PRC Saltillo mean? What does touch that? I was just having this conversation with Anne from Beautiful Speech Life yesterday that once you
Mhm.
get really into AAC, it's hard to remember what it was like at the beginning, like the basic, what is modeling? What does that even look like?
Mhm.
What apps are even available? What devices are even available? What's the difference between what does robust mean? So I could understand like how all of that jargon and terminology could be really confusing for SLPs and then add in Gestalt language processing to the mix. And it's like
Yeah.
you got a big learning curve ahead of you. Like Practical
Yeah.
AAC is always a great place to start. Trying to think of some of the other ones that I used to use back in the day, like AAC Institute.
Mhm. I usually send families, and I've sent to some therapists who aren't super familiar. Kate McLaughlin, the AAC coach, has a YouTube
Mhm.
video about aided language modeling, and it's animated, but it like really gets the point across. It shows different settings and how you could model on the device during that. It's only around 5 minutes long, and I feel like it's super beneficial. I've sent it to different providers I've worked with, families, different speech therapists, and everybody's like, "Oh, that makes a lot of sense." But yeah, I do think it's an ongoing, we're always learning. Like even those of us who have been doing it for a while, right? But also like just give yourself grace to understand like it takes time. You're not just going to get an AAC device in front of you for the first time or maybe do your first AAC funding report and have everything go through 100% perfectly, and that's totally okay.
Yeah, no, that's a really, really great point. I think that this is encouraging for anybody that's listening to this who is newer to AAC. The fact that you pointed out, like, we're still learning too. Like, I just recently learned how to help Gestalt language processors with AAC and how to program those
Mhm.
Gestalts onto the device. Like, that's new information. I'm sure there will be new information as we move along too.
Definitely. And I'm sure, in a couple years there will be even more information.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think before that, it was like literacy, like how to incorporate literacy with AAC. So that was a
Mhm.
hot topic. Now it's Gestalt Language Processing and AAC. So yeah, I'm interested to see what it'll be next.
Yeah, definitely. And even like literacy, I remember when I was starting out, trying to really incorporate literacy more with AAC users, I was like not perfect at it, and I'm still not, but I was like, like modeling on the A to Z keyboard and talking aloud about different speech sounds and letters and sound correspondence while kind of looking for different words and talking the child through that is more literacy exposure than not even talking about it at all. So
Oh,
there are
that's a good
these
point.
small changes you can make too that over time, add up and get other people more comfortable modeling in that way and just gets your brain thinking in a different way of kind of exposing kids to these different topics and skills.
That's a really good point. Like just making those small changes.
Yep, we all start somewhere.
Exactly. So, what kind of recommendations do you have for parents of new AAC users? And I really like, we're going to have a lot of SLPs listening to this. So, it's like, how can SLPs impart information to parents?
So when I have a family get an AAC device for the first time, I honestly tell them like first and foremost, having the device have a home base. So, where in your house can the child reach the device if they want to go to it? And where can you put it every day that, it's accessible for everybody? Some people do an ottoman, some do the kitchen table, some do the nightstand in the bedroom, and just kind of at first getting used to having the device in your house in an accessible place and I tell them, like, that's, like, week 1. Like, don't stress about, saying everything on the device right off the bat, just get used to it being in your house and it being in a place where your child can access it. And then I think it's important for most families over the years, I've had a couple families who, like, they can dive right in and they just get it, and they might be familiar with iOS and iPads and all of that, and just very tech savvy families that right off the bat, they're like, this makes sense to me. But I think starting just modeling during one activity a day. So whether that's mealtime or if every night after you have dinner, you do one on one playtime in the playroom, just getting used to having the device out with you during one activity a day to start and understanding that you're learning the device together. So your child isn't going to just get an AAC device and suddenly be able to communicate, all their wants, needs, thoughts, ideas miraculously. And, neither are you. And that's okay. So just learning the device together. I still, even during modeling, will make a mistake and I just like laugh and I say to the kid, oh, I pressed the wrong word. Like,
Mhm.
let's clear it and go back together and find what I was looking for and let them know like they're not the only one that makes mistakes on the device. I think kids really benefit from feeling, like an equal in the learning process. And if they're feeling like they're the only one making mistakes, then it's not going to be something that they want to try to do. So normalize mishitting an icon, normalize not knowing where a word is. Related to literacy, like Word Finder is your friend. I always
Mhm.
tell families use word finder, talk out loud about, oh, let's think about how we spell this word. I hear buh, it must start with the letter B, and then type out the word ball and then show the child this is where I found ball, it was under toys. And making that a shared learning experience too, and using word finder to just help you find different words and learn locations of words on the device. I have a client who came in yesterday. His mom was adding a button on his device and he sat down and he started adding buttons. He's
Awesome.
5 and he just was like, "Menu, edit," and
Mhm.
and I was like, "How do you know how to do this?" And mom was like, "He saw me do this one time yesterday, but I was talking out loud." And the child's a Gestalt language processor, so he pretty much retained the whole script, and now he talks himself through how to add buttons, and his special interest is bugs. And so we spent the session yesterday just adding rows of bugs that, aren't your typical bugs that come on the AAC device. So, and that goes back to just presuming competence. And then I always tell parents, like, don't miss out on a moment of connection to like be on the device. Like, you want to be connecting with your child first and foremost. And as you are connecting in play and having genuine moments with them, like modeling will follow. Don't ever like leave a good circle of communication to be like, hold on, let me go get your device, just focusing on the relationship first. And I think that modeling will come naturally from those moments of connection.
I love that. So many good little quotes here and tips. Normalize mishitting an icon. Word finder is your friend. Connection is first and foremost, and give the AAC device a home base. I love all of those little suggestions. You started to describe what one of your sessions looked like, the one like where you're editing. Can you describe like what some of your
Mhm.
other sessions look like?
Yeah, I mean, let me see. So for AAC in general or
Maybe
GLP
AAC
or
and
both?
GLP. Yeah, both.
Okay. So a lot of my clients are like 6 and under, so a lot of movement. I have access to a small sensory room. So I kind of meet the clients in the waiting area and they'll let me know if they want to go to my treatment room or the sensory room. And then based on that, if we're going into the sensory room, we have a swing, we have trampoline, we have a crash pad. So we'll play around in there. We have a little ledge that the kids like to climb up on. A lot of my stage one kids will like to sing Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall, and act out that play scheme in there. But my sessions are very much child led. So as long as the client's being safe, I'm not super stressed about what we're doing. I'm not really stressed about what we're doing at all. I'm not a big planner. I'll bring in activities that I know they like, and I try to do like what Alex says for meaningful speech, like 2 to 3 familiar activities and 1 novel, and just having that available. And then I really just follow the client's lead as to what they want to do that day. So yesterday I had, activities out, but he was more interested in the programming of the device. And I think that's a super important skill for kids to learn. And it really helps them have autonomy over their device. So I just kind of dropped the plan that wasn't really even a plan in the first place, but then we went more the editing route. For my older clients, we've been doing a lot of like science experiments lately. So they're really into like baking soda and vinegar and food coloring or water and oil with different colors. And so many of them, I've been with a while, so they kind of know things we've done recently and they might come in and just tell me what they want to do as well. But yeah, I think a lot of movement and just really following their lead, which is good for me too. I'm not the type that can like sit still and do one thing for too long. So it helps all of us, I think.
Yeah, and I think Alex has said movement equals communication, right? So if I feel like if my client's ever
Hmm.
dysregulated or, kind of like going back to stage one, like Gestalt, then I'll try to incorporate some movement, like we'll go on the playground or and whatnot, and then I'll see it start to increase. So it was always like that tip
Hmm.
always stuck with me.
Yes. I have a lot of kids who come in the afternoon pretty tired because I have my afternoon kids are either at school or center-based ABA all day. So the motor room is really beneficial for them to get them up and moving and yeah, really get the language flowing. And it's been really nice to have parents come into the sessions to kind of show them that because I think sometimes at first they're like, why are you doing speech in a gym? But then if I'm kind of showing them like, well, this is how he was presenting when he got here and now that we've been jumping and crashing and swinging, like, he's much more alert and using so much more language, seeing that is helpful for them too.
Yeah, it's hard when like a parent is used to an ABA model style of therapy.
Yes.
Where not to say all ABA therapy is like that, but if it is and it's like tabletop and then seeing you having fun and playing and you're also following the child lead and, you know, addressing communication that way, it is very different.
Yes. So before I opened my own practice, I worked at a company who had a sister ABA company. So I used to see clients during ABA, but they would come to my speech room, which was in the same building, but like separate companies, but in the same space. And since I went out on my own, a lot of those families followed me, but it's the first time the parents have seen speech. And so when I first started, that opened the door to a lot of questions about just like the approach and the differences. And, you just have to be confident in what you're doing. And I think be able to like back yourself up. I haven't had any families be like, well, no, I want you to do, more compliance based therapy. No one's ever said
Right.
that.
Yeah. No, it's just like, "Oh, wow, this can actually work." And it's like, yeah, it can, and you don't have to
Hmm.
do anything differently at home either. You just have to follow your child's lead
And yeah, connect. Yeah, I
and
was
connect.
talking to a parent recently about just like, I think there used to be this myth of like autistic children don't learn naturally and
Mm.
everything has to be super structured. And I feel like for a period of time, like the speech field was going that route. And it's been really nice to see things much more natural, I feel like, than they were a few years ago.
It's funny you say that, like, I haven't heard that myth, but I could definitely see that still perpetuating to this day, because if you're trying to get a child to fit into your plan or what you expect or what looks neurotypical, then yeah, then it needs to be more structured because you're basically trying to get them to do something that isn't neurodiversity affirming, right?
Yeah,
Versus
it's like not natural for them. And
yeah.
I haven't had anyone explicitly like say that to me. Like, I just feel like that is from reading reports from different providers and seeing different approaches used. It makes me feel like there are people that think that.
Yeah. No, I could totally see that. I could totally see that. I don't see like I haven't heard anybody like say it like I mentioned earlier, but I could see people thinking that.
Mhm.
Makes sense.
Yeah, just discrete trials like the only way. But I think if we reframe and incorporate interests, we see a lot of growth
Well, and
naturally.
also if you're trying to use an analytic approach
Mhm.
with a
Mhm.
Gestalt language processor, that's going to be happen too, right? Like if you're trying to that would be more structured because you're trying to get them to use a single word or and it's not natural to them.
Right.
Okay. I'm just like, it's like a mind, whoa,
No,
like,
I know everything is so connected.
yeah. Oh, wow. Really good points. So, if someone is newer to AAC, I don't think we really touched on this. Like, where can they get devices? I know you mentioned like how to get some free apps. What other like sources can they lean on?
So most states have like a local lending library. So you can go to your local lending library and get devices that way. Except I've been trying to do that and haven't been able to connect personally. But I don't know.
Why?
I don't know. I reached out to mine a couple weeks ago, never heard back. I'll have to follow up. But
Yeah.
I think that I mean Rhode Island's the smallest state. I don't think we have like the best resources available just because we don't have as many. So, but yeah, many states and areas have local lending libraries. Reaching out to the reps, like I mentioned, they can actually send you trial devices. So I have a few different devices I keep in my office from local reps that are on like a 1 to 3 month trial basis. And many of the vendors are really good about, I'm like, hey, I need to extend this. I have a new client coming in. They're like, no problem. One thing, like, I've been contracting with schools, which is newer for me, but the school SLPs have been pushing admin to like have me do more trainings on specific devices and just like in the classroom. So kind of if you're able and it's in the budget at your school to advocate for, having a specialist come in that way just to teach you more about different systems, if that might be the setting you're in. And then if you have a clinic iPad or your personal iPad, getting the applications free, like I had mentioned, as a speech therapist. But you can definitely get almost every app or vocabulary, for free these days, whether it just be taking a simple course or reaching out to a local rep. Those are all options.
Mhm. Yeah. That's a shame that your lending library hasn't responded yet. I'm wondering if there's turnover. Like here,
Yeah.
the staff at ours has been there forever, so they're pretty good at responding.
I wanted to see if they had any like switch activated toys or setups to
Oh
help
yeah.
with that for one of the clients, the students I'm contracting with out of school, but I haven't heard back. But
That's
I'll follow up. That's a good reminder
yeah.
for myself.
Follow up. And then if someone wants to move forward with an evaluation, what tips do you have for that?
For the speech therapist or the parent?
The speech therapist.
Yeah, so when I did my first AAC eval, the vendor for BRC really helped me. He knew it was my first eval. I was working in Florida at the time. He was super friendly, really approachable.
Was
I
it
had
Daniel?
child. Yeah,
I used to work with him. Used to be a PRC Saltillo, a PRC rep before they were PRC Saltillo.
Daniel's the best.
He is. He's so nice.
He was like, I was just like a deer in the headlights. Like, I met this 11-year-old client. She had never had AAC. She was super behavioral. And I was like, I don't know what to do. And I just was a CF, reached out to different vendors. And then Daniel really helped me through the process. And then once I had that one under my belt, I felt good. But I mean, basic layout is you want to do a benefits check to see if the client's insurance will cover any AAC systems, and if so, which providers and vendors they work with. And then also talking to the families. Sometimes parents don't want to wait 3, 4, 5 months to get a device through insurance. So if the family is able to purchase an iPad and an application, knowing that, usually that's something in my experience families can get much quicker if they're open to getting that and you can get started right away. So, kind of thinking about which approach they want to go, whether it be a device funded through insurance or a personally purchased iPad and application. And then from there, as part of your evaluation, you want to either do specific trials with various devices or at least consider different devices and vocabularies. And then once you have an idea of which device and vocabulary would be the best fit for your client, that's when you would start the funding process, whether it be writing an eval for the insurance or even if I have families who get an iPad and an app, I still write an evaluation so that they can bring that, with them to school or their next provider or OT or their ABA center to kind of see like this is why we decided on this device. Because unfortunately, there's been I think there are situations where parents just buy a device for their client, their child, like an iPad and an app, and they're super well intentioned. But then I've heard stories of like then they go to the school and then they have an issue with implementing it in the school because they don't have an evaluation that went with it. And I think it can really clear up some of those murky waters if you just have something by a professional that's like, hey, this is what we trialed, this is the process we used, this is how the child got this, these are the recommendations.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of pushback if it's just a parent buying an app and then expecting the school to use it because the schools typically have like their process for doing the evaluation.
Hmm.
And if they put that on the IEP, then they don't necessarily have to provide it right then. But if like let's say the family didn't bring in the device that day, then the school has to then like provide an equitable communication
Right.
device. So
Which I
yeah.
understand from the school's perspective, but it's also like, I don't know, when I have a go-getter parent like that, like I feel like it's really exciting. It's like, ooh, like they're open to AAC. They really want their child to communicate.
Yeah, it's so hard. It's so hard. And also, like, we know that A trial is beneficial because it's all about marketing, right? To parents. So if a parent sees a particular app that's been marketed very well, then they might go and purchase that, but that may not be the best fit for their child either. That's why, like, it's like buying glasses, right? Without getting an evaluation done by an optometrist,
Mhm.
if you want to liken it to something.
Yeah, definitely.
So that is the fault of the manufacturers in that case by marketing to the wrong people. I'll just say
Right.
that. But I think they've done a better job. I think that they have partnered. It used to be like, let's go around the SLP and let's go around, let's give it just to the consumer. But I think
Mhm.
the companies are realizing now that they have to collaborate with the schools and collaborate with the SLPs so that this client can have the best outcomes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Amazing. Well, this has been super, super helpful. I think for anybody who is like working with Gestalt language processors or new to AAC, and you've explained like different ideas for like programming on the device, how to get access to devices, how to do AAC evaluation. So it's been super helpful. You've got some more resources here. Do you want to go ahead and talk about those as well?
Sure. So if I have a question about an autistic client, I really like the Autism Inclusivity Facebook group. It's run by autistic adults. I know it's a Facebook group, but I get so much feedback related to, why autistic children might be doing things that they're doing. I just wrote in last week a question about screen time for one of my older clients and just like his iPad use on his leisure iPad. And I got so many perspectives that I never thought of because I am not an autistic person. And so now today during my session, I'm going to talk with mom about the feedback I got and, how we can kind of inform our decision using that information. Ask Me I'm an AAC User is another Facebook group where you can ask questions to people who communicate using AAC, either full time or part time. So I like that group. Sometimes I talk about that group with my older clients to let them know there's a group like that out there. There's adults out there that use AAC just like you. The Therapist Neurodiversity Collective is a group with a ton of resources on neurodiversity-informed practices and finding neurodiversity-informed providers, just all things therapy and neurodiversity. Rachel Dorsey is an autistic SLP. She is also a Gestalt language processor, so I find anything that she says about Gestalt language processing and autism to be invaluable, and I feel like she has just provided us with so much information over the last few years, especially free of charge, which is amazing. I mean, she also has some courses, but just starting out going on her Instagram, you will learn so much. Um, Natural Language on the Autism Spectrum is a book by Marge Blanc, and it talks all about Gestalt language processing. It has case studies. It teaches you how to score language samples. It's just a great resource for anyone working with Gestalt language processors. And then the Autism Handbook by Andy Putt is great for teaching kids and parents. There's a children's one and one geared towards parents about autism from a neurodiversity affirming, strengths based lens that I've had families read it and feel like it gives them hope for their child. And it's not, sometimes families have experiences with providers or doctors at diagnosis that make them feel like, you know, unsure and nervous. And they've told me, reading that and having conversations around that resource has helped them feel, more potential and they're not so scared of the future, after looking at resources like that.
That's amazing. I actually don't have that handbook, but I've seen it and I've heard really great things. So now you're making me like think about consider even getting it. It sounds really good.
I think it's good sometimes to just have something that is a resource to like guide a conversation. Because sometimes
Yeah.
I feel like I say things and families are like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. But like, it doesn't seem research based or it doesn't
Yeah.
seem, but just having like this handout, like, look, this is what
Yes.
I'm talking about. Here you go. It just makes it seem so much more real, I guess. And I think part
Validates
of,
it.
yeah, And,
Mhm.
there's going to be so much more research coming out about neurodiversity affirming practices and different approaches, but like we're in this time where I don't know, like there's not a ton of research, I guess, depending on where you're looking. It's more anecdotal experiences, talking to autistic adults, things like that, which I think is very important part of research, but it may not be what some people are looking for. So just having something to kind of guide a conversation has been helpful.
Yes, I agree. And then also like referencing like Instagram and Facebook groups can feel a little bit like unprofessional, I guess is the word, but like there's such great sources of information. So, like you were saying, having like a handbook to back it up can be really helpful.
Mhm.
Amazing. And then you have some more references here.
Yeah, so the meaningful speech course, like I mentioned, that's how I learned about Gestalt language processing. I think it's a great course to start with. There's also an AAC and Gestalt language processing course. SD from the inside out. Jesse's sensory course is how I learned a lot about sensory, how it ties into speech. I think it's another great course that you'll learn a lot. You can pull a lot of information from. Autism Level Up is a website I love to use for I use it mostly for, like, regulation strategies and products and, like, social skills and not social skills in the old school, like, "This is how you have a conversation," more like neurodiversity-informed social skills therapy ideas. One of the I guess, owners or lead people on there is autistic. So and again, I find a lot of the, approaches they use to be invaluable because it's coming from an autistic person themselves. Meaningfulspeech.com for parents. There's a registry on there if you're looking for a Gestalt language processing speech pathologist. And then Marge Blanc's website, the Communication Development Center. There's so much free information on there about different stages of Gestalt language processing, different strategies for working with children in different stages. I mean, there's cheat sheets, there's how to meet a child in the stage they're at and model language. It's just so much free information that I would encourage everybody to check out.
Yeah. I need to reference that, read that website a little bit more than I do. Especially now that I'm in these later stages. I feel like it's getting a little bit harder because you're teaching
Mhm.
grammatical structures, but like in child-led play-based activities. So
Yeah.
I need to refer that. Thanks for the reminder.
I also just got the grammar tracker from Corinne from Crescendo Communication. She has like a stage
Okay.
4 and 5 grammar tracker, and that's been really nice because she has it set up so, like, you wanna hear them use the target 3 times. She has things really broken down really nicely. I That has been super beneficial for my clients in the higher stages.
Is it like a digital resource or what is it?
Yeah, it's like a PDF, and then you can print it out and look at a language sample and kind of mark, like, do they have not? Do they have cannot? Do they have will not? Do they have did not? Do they have do not? And it really breaks I have trouble sometimes with the grammar piece of things. Grammar's so complex, and I feel like I'm doing so good with data and progress until I get to the later stages, and then
Same.
it's really, like, nitty-gritty, and so it's really helped me, like, be able to see the holes in my client's grammar. Because sometimes I'm like, "Oh my gosh, they've come so far, they're talking so much, they're telling me these stories, and I'm not even noticing the way that they're talking, they're kind of leaving out,
Mhm.
conjunctions or whatever," and it helps me go back and look.
Okay, I'll check that out. I've been referencing the DSS, but
Mhm.
I like more, more resources because I think
Yeah.
everybody learns differently and maybe that one's just not resonating well for me. So maybe seeing this one will help better.
It's like the DSS broken down by each grammatical structure in a more structured way to track.
Okay. All right. And I'm sure because she has a better understanding, like, we were taking that from an analytic approach, right? So, like, she has a better understanding of Gestalt language processors. So maybe like it makes more sense because who
Mhm.
originally wrote the DSS? I forgot her name. Laura something?
Lee, Light? Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. So, like, that
One of
wasn't written
those.
for Gestalt language processors. So I'd be curious to
Right.
see Corinne's. Thank you for sharing that one.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, Kaitlin, if people are not familiar with you already, where can they find and connect with you?
So I'm on Instagram as Kaitlin Mulcahey SLP. I'm kind of taking not like a break, but I haven't been posting a lot lately. I'm not feeling super inspired, and business has just been like really busy, which is great. So right now my focus is there, which my website is competentcommunicators.org. And then you can email me, Kaitlin Mulcahey SLP at gmail.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much. This has been super helpful.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was fun.